Once you get on them, just open them up.
Again, Roger. I see your element.
Light them all up.
002 traffic, 260.
Come on, fire.
Hey, Roger.
Keep shooting. Keep shooting.
Clearly, there were two cameramen there holding cameras, not arms.
David, you've written about your articles in The Observer in the build-up to the Iraq invasion, that you feel, and I quote you, nauseated, angry and ashamed about what you wrote. What did you mean exactly?
It's now, and has been for a number of years, very painfully apparent that the facts that I believed to be true in those articles were not true. They were a pack of lies fed to me by a fairly sophisticated disinformation campaign.
This was the slaughter known as the First World War. 16 millions died and 21 million were wounded. At the height of the carnage, the Prime Minister of Great Britain, David Lloyd George, had a private chat with the editor of The Guardian, C.P. Scott. If people really knew the truth, said the Prime Minister, the war would be stopped tomorrow. But of course they don't know and can't know. A pioneer of modern propaganda was this man, Edward Bernays. Bernays invented the term public relations. He wrote, "The intelligent manipulation of the masses is an invisible government which is the true ruling power in our country." He was part of a secretive group called the U.S. Committee on Public Information, set up in 1917 to persuade reluctant Americans to join the war in Europe.
Edward Bernays and Walter Lippmann go to Woodrow Wilson and say, look, man, if you're going to enter into this war, we are going to need to sell this war to the American people. And so Wilson institutes and creates the first modern propaganda machinery.
Iraq, March the 20th, 2003. The creation of illusions and the selling of war had come a long way since Edward Bernays. The selling of this invasion depended on the news media to promote a series of illusions, like the link between Saddam Hussein and 9/11. But Saddam Hussein had absolutely nothing to do with it.
Saddam Hussein had nothing to do with it, but that didn't matter. Because when you start using symbols that have been separated from their meaning and have sort of taken on a life of their own, the facts don't matter anymore.
This is the Pentagon, which spends almost $1 billion a year just on advertising, recruiting, propaganda, the selling of war.
There are Pentagon contracts with news organizations in terms of how to manipulate the news. There are Pentagon officials involved in press releases that go to the media in which intelligence is used to manipulate public opinion, which is a violation of the charter of any intelligence organization.
The chief United Nations weapons inspector in Iraq, Scott Ritter, gave me this interview 4 years before the invasion.
In 1991, Iraq had significant capability in the area of chemical weapons, biological weapons, nuclear weapons production capability, and long-range ballistic missile manufacturing capability. By 1998, the chemical weapons infrastructure had been completely dismantled or destroyed by UNSCOM or by Iraq in compliance with UNSCOM's mandate. The biological weapons program had been declared in its totality late in the game, but it was gone. All the major facilities eliminated. The nuclear weapons program, again, completely eliminated. If I had to quantify Iraq's threat in terms of weapons of mass destruction, the real threat is zero, none.
The former chief weapons inspector, Scott Ritter, was saying as early as 1998 that Saddam Hussein was completely disarmed. Scott Ritter, I think, appeared in 2003 twice, and once at 3 in the morning on BBC 24 News. He was a vital expert witness, and there were others.
Well, I don't know why Scott Ritter didn't appear more, but he clearly did appear at times.
That's the question for the BBC. Why weren't those who were
Why weren't those
witnesses
voices heard?
Yes.
Well, because there were also other voices that we were putting on the air.
I think what critics of that would say is that the broadcasters, notably the BBC, echoed or amplified the lies told in the run-up to the invasion, rather than investigating itself.
What the BBC, though, have a duty to do is to report what governments and their representatives are saying.
But didn't it occur to you that these people were professional liars?
I overcame what should have been stronger doubts. I can make no excuses. I should have been more sceptical. What happened was a crime. It was a crime on a very large scale.
Does that make a journalist accomplices?
Yeah, broadly. Unwitting, perhaps, but yes.
This CBS News special report is part of our continuing coverage of America at War. Here is Dan Rather.
For 24 years, the most famous news anchor on American television was Dan Rather.
I have said that whether those of us in journalism want to admit it or not, then at least in some small way, fear is present in every newsroom in the country.
I spent time with people who were senior producers on television news, and one of them said to me, in the context of quite a heated discussion that was going on with other journalists, he said, listen, he said, we wait in fear. That was his exact words. We wait in fear for the telephone call from the Israelis. He said the only issue we face then is how high up it's come from them. Has it come from a monitoring group? Has it come from the Israeli embassy?
These were to be the borders of Israel and Palestine when Israel was founded in 1948. And this is what's left of Palestine today, fragmented and dislocated by a military occupation that defies international law and is backed by one of the world's most sophisticated propaganda machines. This is Palestinian cameraman Imad Ghanin being shot repeatedly by Israeli soldiers. The killing of non-Western journalists is rarely news. Imad Ghanin was 21 and lost both his legs.
I think what it comes down to is a basic knowledge that journalists have, which is quite simply that if they criticise Israel, then it's potentially trouble. If they criticise the Palestinians, then there is much less of a problem.
Government is an information machine, and we would control access for journalists to us, to governments. When I was in news department in the Foreign Office, we would control access to the Foreign Secretary as a form of reward to journalists if they were critical, if we felt they were too hostile to our account of events. We would not give them the goodies of trips with the Foreign Secretary around the world, or exclusive interviews every now and then. We did the same in New York. If journalists were not particularly supportive to our account, we would freeze them out. We would make life harder for them. But there is a subtle and private relationship between them, which is basically of favoritism, that certain journalists are rewarded with access for being supportive of the story. They will basically tell journalists.
One of the public relations triumphs of the 21st century was the rise of Barack Obama. His campaign slogan was, "Change we can believe in." He was a brand that offered something special, exciting. In 2008, Obama, the candidate, was voted Marketer of the Year, ahead of Apple, Nike, and Coors Beer. Above all, the perception of brand Obama was that he was against war.
Most of you know that I opposed this war from the start. I thought it was a tragic mistake.
But that was false. As president, Obama has not withdrawn America from Iraq and has backed US military action in Afghanistan, Pakistan, Somalia and Yemen, and approved a military budget of $708 billion, the biggest war spending of all time. More than any other president, Obama has prosecuted truth-tellers known as whistleblowers. And this is WikiLeaks, an internet whistleblowing organization. Independent and stateless, it represents a landmark in journalism. WikiLeaks has released hundreds of thousands of secret Pentagon documents that describe the wholesale killing of civilians in Iraq and Afghanistan. I noticed one that I had a personal interest in was one that from the Ministry of Defence, classified document that equated terrorists with investigative journalists as threats.
And Russian spies.
And Russian spies.
Yeah, as in fact, in many sections of that report, investigative journalists are the number one threat to the sort of information security of the Ministry of Defence. That was a 2,000-page document on how to stop leaks from the Ministry of Defence, which we leaked.
This secret Pentagon document states clearly that US intelligence intends to destroy trust in WikiLeaks by threatening whistleblowers with exposure and criminal prosecution, thereby discrediting truth-tellers. I mean, for you to receive that volume of documentation suggests that there must be something of a rebellion going on within the system.
Yes. I mean, it's the one hopeful thing is, in fact, that there are good people in the US military. And some of those people have had enough. It's sort of another way of being a conscientious objector. And in fact, arguably a far more powerful way of objecting to the war.